The massive human warship HSS Tortoise moved slowly through space, its engines humming at a steady but unimpressive pace. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge, his back straight and his face calm despite the mocking comments coming through the communication systems. "Look at that thing crawl," said a voice with a musical alien accent. "Are the humans using pedal power now?" Laughter filled the channel. Walker kept his eyes on the view screen, watching as sleek alien vessels zipped past his ship with ease. The Tortoise was 10 times their size but moved at less than a quarter of their speed. "Communications Officer Davis, please mute the open channel," Walker said quietly. "Yes, sir." Davis tapped his console and the voices disappeared. Walker turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Reed. "How's the crew holding up?" Reed's tired eyes met his. "They're trying to stay professional, sir, but it's hard. The Velox ships have been buzzing us all day, showing off. Some of the younger crew members are taking it personally." Walker nodded. He understood. The Tortoise was Earth's newest and most expensive warship, the product of 15 years of secret development. From the outside, it looked like a failure, slow, clunky, and outdated compared to the swift vessels of their alien allies. "Call the department heads to the war room in 30 minutes, Walker said. "It's time for a reminder about our real mission." Admiral Kroll of the Velox Empire stood on his bridge watching the human ship with amusement. His vessel, the Swift Striker, was a marvel of technology, sleek, fast, and deadly. Like all Velox, Kroll believed that speed was the most important quality in combat. Their entire military doctrine was built around being faster than their enemies. "Humans," he said to his officers, shaking his head. His silver skin caught the light as he moved. "They build ships like they're moving houses." His bridge crew laughed dutifully. "Send a message to Captain Walker," Kroll ordered. "Invite him to dinner on my ship tonight. I want to see the face of the man commanding that space rock." "In the war room of the Tortoise," Walker looked at the faces of his senior officers. Chief Engineer Torres, Weapons Officer Banks, Navigation Officer Lee, Medical Officer Chen, and Science Officer Miller. They were the only ones on the ship who knew the truth. "I know it's been a difficult day," Walker began. "The Alliance exercises are designed to test our ships in various scenarios, and today's speed trials were challenging." "Humiliating is the word, sir," Torres said bluntly. Her hands were stained with engine grease. "My engineers are taking it hard. They know we could get more speed if we use the main reactor for propulsion instead of its intended purpose," Walker finished for her. "Which is precisely why we're here." He activated the room's security system, ensuring their conversation was private. "The Tortoise isn't slow because of poor design," Walker reminded them. "It's slow by choice. Our mission isn't to win races." He tapped a command into the table console, and a holographic image appeared. Detailed schematics of the Tortoise, showing systems that weren't on any official blueprint. "Our ship houses technology that no one in the Galactic Alliance has seen before," he continued. "The gravity anchor requires enormous power reserves. If we diverted that power to engines, yes, we could move faster. But that's not our mission." Banks nodded. "The Alliance races all think speed is everything because they've never encountered an enemy who could neutralize that advantage." "Exactly," Walker said. "Earth took a different approach. While everyone else was building faster ships, we built a ship that could make speed irrelevant." A message alert sounded, interrupting their discussion. Reed checked her tablet and looked up. "Sir, Admiral Kroll has invited you to dinner on his flagship." Walker considered this. "Accept the invitation. It's time I got to know our ally." The Swift Striker was everything the Tortoise was not: elegant, streamlined, and fast. Walker felt every eye on him as he was escorted to Admiral Kroll's dining room. The Velox crew watched him with barely concealed amusement, as if he were a curiosity from a primitive world. Admiral Kroll greeted him with the formal bow of the Velox people. "Captain Walker, welcome aboard. I trust your shuttle trip wasn't too strenuous?" Walker caught the slight insult. implying that even a small journey might tax humans, but smiled politely. "Not at all, Admiral. Thank you for having me." The dining room was impressive, with large windows showing the stars streaking by as the swift striker maintained its patrol course. The tortoise was visible in the distance, looking like it was standing still in comparison. "A magnificent view," said Walker, looking out at space. "Indeed," Kroll replied, following his gaze to the distant human ship. "Though some objects spoil the scenery." Several Velox officers at the table chuckled. "Tell me, Captain," Kroll said as servers brought in exotic foods from across the galaxy, "why does Earth insist on building such substantial vessels? Surely, you've seen that the future of space combat lies in speed and maneuverability." Walker took a sip of water before answering. "Every species approaches problems differently, Admiral. Humans have a saying, slow and steady wins the race." "A charming folk wisdom," Kroll said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "but hardly applicable to modern warfare." "Perhaps," Walker said, "or perhaps not. History will decide." Kroll leaned forward, dropping some of his diplomatic veneer. "Captain, I respect Earth's right to design ships however you wish. But as your ally, I must express concern. In a real combat situation, the tortoise would be an easy target. Too slow to evade, too big to hide." "I appreciate your concern," Walker said calmly, "but different tools serve different purposes." "And what purpose does the tortoise serve?" asked one of Kroll's officers sharply. "Other than consuming resources?" Before Walker could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. The Admiral's communication device chimed urgently. "What is it?" Kroll demanded. A worried voice replied, "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from Outpost Sigma-7. They're under attack by unknown forces." The dining room atmosphere changed, instantly. All pretense of social niceties vanished as Kroll stood. "Excuse me, Captain Walker, duty calls." "Of course," Walker said, rising as well. "I should return to my ship." As they hurried to the bridge, more reports came in. 2 more outposts were sending distress signals, then abruptly falling silent. On the Swift Striker's bridge, chaos reigned. As reports flooded in, Walker stood quietly, observing as Kroll took command of the situation. "Visual contact with the attacking ships at Outpost Delta 9, announced a communications officer. The main screen activated, showing grainy footage of strange vessels moving with incredible speed, faster even than the Velox ships. They resembled metallic insects darting and weaving through defensive fire without being hit. "What are they?" Kroll demanded. "Unknown, sir. No match in our database." Walker watched the footage carefully. There was something odd about the way the enemy ships moved, not just fast, but somehow distorting the space around them. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I need to return to the tortoise immediately." Kroll barely glanced at him. Yes, we'll send you back." He turned to an aide. "Escort Captain Walker to his shuttle." As Walker was leaving, he heard Kroll issuing orders. "Prepare the fleet for battle. Contact Alliance Command. Tell them the Swift Striker will lead the response force." Walker's shuttle pilot rushed him back to the tortoise. As soon as he reached the bridge, he called for battle stations. "Sir," Reed said with confusion, "Alliance Command is assembling a response fleet under Admiral Kroll. We've been ordered to fall back to a defensive position near Earth." Walker smiled grimly. "Have we now?" He looked at the tactical display showing the strange enemy ships destroying everything in their path. The Velox and other Alliance races were scrambling their fastest vessels to intercept. "They think speed will save them," Walker said softly. "They're wrong." He turned to his bridge crew. "Prepare the gravity anchor for its first real test. It's time to show everyone why the tortoise was built to be slow." The Alliance Command Center buzzed with urgent activity. Representatives from 12 different species gathered around the main strategic display, watching as red dots representing the unknown enemy ships spread across the star map. Admiral Kroll stood at the center, issuing orders with confidence. "The Velox battle group will lead the main assault. Trebian cruisers will form the second wave. Human ships..." He paused, looking at Captain Walker with barely hidden disdain. "We'll guard the retreat path and provide support fire from maximum distance." Walker said nothing. Around the table, other commanders nodded in agreement with Kroll's plan. It made sense to them. Put the fastest ships at the front where they could engage the enemy quickly. After the meeting, Walker was approached by General Thorne, Earth's senior military representative to the Alliance. "I know what you're thinking, James," Thorne said quietly, "but this isn't the time to reveal our true capabilities. Not yet." Walker frowned. "These unknown ships, the Swarm, they're calling them, they're moving in ways that defy normal physics. If I'm right, the Tortoise might be the only vessel that can effectively counter them." Thorne shook his head. "Orders from Earth Command are clear. Observe only, do not engage unless directly attacked." Walker's jaw tightened. "And if Admiral Kroll's fleet fails?" "Then we reevaluate," Thorne said grimly. "But Earth doesn't want to show all its cards in the first round." Back on the Tortoise, Walker called his senior officers together. "We've been ordered to take up a defensive position here," he said, pointing to a location on the star map far from the expected battle zone. "Official mission, guard the retreat path and provide long-range support." Lieutenant Reed frowned. "They're sidelining us." "Yes," Walker agreed, "but that may work to our advantage. We'll be in position to observe the enemy's tactics without being in the thick of the fight." Chief Engineer Torres looked up from her tablet. "I've been analyzing the footage from the outpost attacks. These swarm ships are doing something strange, with space-time around themselves. It's almost like they're riding waves of compressed space." Science Officer Miller nodded excitedly. "That's what I think, too. They're creating micro-distortions in the fabric of space-time. That's how they achieve such speeds without massive energy signatures." "Can the gravity anchor affect those distortions?" Walker asked. Miller and Torres exchanged looks. "In theory, yes," Miller said. "The anchor was designed to create stable gravity wells that normalize space-time. If these swarm ships depend on space-time manipulation for their speed advantage, then we could potentially neutralize that advantage," Walker finished. "Good. Keep analyzing the data. I want a full report before the fleet engages." The Swift Striker led a formation of 50 Velox warships, their sleek forms cutting through space with graceful speed. Behind them, the ships of other Alliance species followed in their assigned positions. The human vessels, including the Tortoise, took up the rear guard position as ordered. Admiral Kroll stood proudly on his bridge. "The enemy will learn what happens when they challenge the Alliance," he declared. "Our speed and firepower will overwhelm them." His tactical officer looked less certain. "Admiral, the enemy vessels are showing unusual movement patterns. They seem to be able to change direction instantly without deceleration." "No matter," Kroll said dismissively. "No ship can outrun Velox targeting systems." On the Tortoise, Walker and his crew watched the tactical displays closely as the Alliance fleet approached the swarm. "They're moving into standard attack formation," Reed observed, "spreading out to create a wide firing line." Walker nodded. "And the swarm?" "Still maintaining their scattered formation. No apparent coordination, but—" Reed paused, frowning. At her screen. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from them. Pulses of some kind getting stronger." Walker turned to Miller. "Analysis?" The science officer was already working his console. "The pulses appear to be space-time distortions, just as we suspected, but they're increasing in intensity. I think they're preparing to—" He never finished his sentence. On the main screen, they watched as the scattered swarm ships suddenly converged with impossible speed, punching through the center of the Velox formation before the Alliance ships could fire a single shot. "My God," whispered Davis from the communications station. "They've surrounded the Swift Striker." The swarm ships moved like a fluid around Kroll's flagship, their movements too fast and unpredictable for the Velox targeting systems. The Swift Striker's shields flared repeatedly as they absorbed hit after hit. "Alliance fleet is in disarray," Reed reported. "Velox ships trying to regroup, but the swarm is hitting them from all directions. The Swift Striker's shields are down to 40%. Walker stood, his decision made. Navigation, set course to intercept, full power to forward shields. Reed looked up in surprise. Sir, our orders. I know our orders, Lieutenant, Walker said firmly. But I'm not going to watch good people die when we might be able to help. Communication, send a message to General Thorne, tell him we're moving to assist. Admiral Kroll gripped the arms of his command chair as his ship shuddered under another attack. How are they targeting us so effectively? He demanded. Unknown, sir, his tactical officer replied, voice tight with stress. Our evasive maneuvers aren't working. It's as if they can predict where we'll be. Shields at 28% and falling, another officer reported. We can't take much more of this. Kroll's communication officer suddenly looked up. Sir, the human ship Tortoise is breaking formation. They're coming this way. What? Kroll couldn't hide his surprise. At their speed, they'll never reach us in time. The Tortoise moved steadily forward, its massive engines pushing the huge ship as fast as they could, which wasn't very fast at all compared to the other vessels. But Walker didn't need speed. Status of the gravity anchor? He asked. Torres looked up from her engineering station. Ready for activation, Captain. Power levels optimal. Good. Walker watched as they drew closer to the battle. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Several Velox ships were already disabled, and the Swift Striker's shields were nearly gone. Sir, Miller called out, I've completed my analysis of the swarm's movement patterns. They're definitely manipulating space-time to achieve their speed. The distortions are centered approximately 20 meters in front of each ship. Walker nodded. Then that's where we target. Banks, prepare to activate the gravity anchor on my mark. Weapons Officer Banks bent over his console. Target zone established. Ready on your command. The Tortoise was still a considerable distance from the battle when Walker gave the order. Activate gravity anchor, full power. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a barely visible ripple spread out from the human ship, expanding rapidly through space like an invisible wave. As the wave reached the battling ship, something remarkable happened. The swarm vessels, which had been darting around with impossible agility, suddenly jerked and slowed. Their movements became more normal, more predictable. It's working, Miller exclaimed. The anchor is normalizing space-time in the target zone. Their space-time manipulation is being neutralized. On the main screen, they could see the swarm ships struggling to maintain their previous speed and agility. Without their space-time advantage, they were just ordinary vessels, still fast, but no longer impossibly so. Communications, Walker ordered, open a channel to Admiral Kroll. When the connection was established, Walker spoke clearly. Admiral, the enemy ships have been temporarily slowed. I suggest you take advantage of this opportunity to regroup your forces. Kroll's face appeared on the screen, his silver skin marred with a cut across his forehead. For once there was no mockery in his eyes, only confusion and the beginnings of grudging respect. What did you do, Walker? He demanded. I'll explain later, Walker replied. Right now, you need to get your ships into a defensive formation. The effect won't last forever. As Kroll gave orders to his fleet, several swarm ships broke away from the battle and turned toward the Tortoise, seemingly aware of the source of their sudden disadvantage. Sir, Reed said urgently, 12 enemy vessels on an intercept course with us. Walker nodded calmly. As expected, prepare to demonstrate the second feature of our slow ship. Let's show them why turtles have shells. The 12 swarm ships cut through space toward the Tortoise, their movement still affected by the gravity anchor but growing more coordinated by the second. They were adapting. They're learning to compensate for the normalized space-time, Science Officer Miller reported, his eyes fixed on his readings, adjusting their engines to work within the constraints we've imposed. Captain Walker nodded calmly. As expected. Banks, status of defensive systems? Weapons Officer Banks looked up from his console. All shield generators at maximum. Armor. Plating fully energized. The crew watched as the enemy ships approached, their sleek insect-like forms growing larger on the view screen. Unlike most ships in the galaxy, which relied on speed and maneuverability for defense, the Tortoise was built to take hits. Impact in 10 seconds. Reed announced, her voice steady despite the tension. Walker gripped the arms of his command chair. Brace for contact. The lead swarm ship fired first, a bright beam of energy striking the Tortoise's forward shields. The human ship shuddered slightly but held firm. Shield impact at 92% absorption, Banks reported. Minimal energy bleed-through. More beams followed as the other swarm ships joined the attack, their weapons concentrating on different sections of the Tortoise's massive hull. They're probing for weaknesses, Walker observed. Standard tactic when facing an unknown defense. Chief. Engineer Torres monitored the shield outputs from her station. The layered defense system is working perfectly, Captain. Outer shields absorb the initial impact. Middle layer dissipates the energy. Inner layer prevents bleed-through. The swarm ships circled the Tortoise like angry hornets, their weapons fire constant. Despite their best efforts, they could not penetrate the human vessel's defenses. Sir, Communications Officer Davis called out. Admiral Kroll is hailing us. On screen, Walker ordered. Kroll's face appeared, his expression a mixture of confusion and reluctant admiration. Captain Walker, what exactly is that ship of yours? Walker allowed himself a small smile. A different approach to warfare, Admiral. While the rest of the galaxy focused on building faster ships, Earth decided to explore other advantages. Your ship is drawing their attention, Kroll noted. It's giving us time to regroup. Whatever you're doing to slow them down, keep doing. That's the plan, Admiral. Tortoise out. Walker turned to his crew. Status of the gravity anchor? Still operating at full capacity, Torres reported. But power consumption is increasing. The swarm is actively fighting against the effect now. Walker considered this. How long can we maintain the field? At current power levels, about 3 hours. But if they keep adapting, that time will decrease. Walker nodded. Then we move to Phase 2. Banks prepare the demonstration package. Banks smiled for the first time since the battle began. With pleasure, sir. From the bridge of the Swift Striker, Admiral Kroll watched as his fleet regrouped around him. The mysterious slowdown effect from the human ship had given them precious time to reform their defensive lines. The enemy vessels near us are operating at approximately 60% of their previous capability, his tactical officer reported. But they appear to be adapting. Kroll frowned. And the human ship? The Tortoise? Holding position, sir. Their shields are withstanding concentrated fire from 12 swarm vessels. Impossible, one of his bridge officers muttered. No ship's defenses could withstand that kind of focused attack. Kroll wasn't so sure anymore. Perhaps we've underestimated our human allies, he said quietly. Watch and learn. On the Tortoise, Walker gave the order. Activate targeting systems. For quantum lock torpedoes, select 4 primary targets. Banks worked his console with practiced efficiency. Target selected. Quantum lock established. The Tortoise's main weapons weren't impressive looking. No massive gun barrels or glowing energy ports. Just small, unassuming launch tubes scattered across the hull. Fire, Walker commanded. 4 torpedoes shot from the Tortoise, seemingly slow compared to most ship weapons. The swarm vessels easily dodged them, or would have if the torpedoes worked like normal projectiles. Instead, the moment the torpedoes launched, quantum connections formed between them and their targets. As Walker had explained to his senior officers, the weapons didn't need to chase their targets through space. They created a quantum entanglement, linking 2 points in space regardless of the distance between them. The results were immediate and devastating. 4 swarm ships simply exploded, their hulls rupturing from within as the quantum effect bypassed their shields entirely. Direct hits confirmed, Banks reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. Targets destroyed. The remaining swarm ships broke off their attack momentarily, clearly surprised by the unexpected weapon. They're reassessing, Reed observed. Probably trying to figure out what hit them. Walker nodded. They won't find it in any database. The quantum lock torpedo is a completely new weapon type. Miller looked up from his science station. Sir, I'm detecting a surge in communication between the swarm ships, encrypted, but the pattern suggests they're sharing information. They're adapting again, Walker said. Good, Banks, prepare a second volley. Different configuration this time. Across the battlefield, other Alliance commanders watched in amazement as the slow, bulky human ship destroyed 4 swarm vessels in an instant. What was that? A Trebian captain asked over the common channel. How did they hit those ships? They dodged the torpedoes. Admiral Kroll didn't answer. He was watching the Tortoise with new eyes, reassessing everything he thought he knew about human military technology. Sir, his communications officer reported, General Thorne of Earth Command is requesting to speak with you. Kroll accepted the call. Thorne's weathered face appeared on his screen. Admiral, Thorne said without preamble, I see the Tortoise has revealed some of its capabilities. Some? Kroll repeated. What else is that ship hiding? Thorne's expression remained neutral. That's classified information, Admiral, but I'm authorizing Captain Walker to use all necessary measures to counter this threat. You knew, Kroll said, realization dawning. All this time you let us believe your ships were technologically inferior. Not inferior, Thorne corrected. Just different. Earth has always taken a unique approach to problem solving. Back on the Tortoise, the battle continued. The remaining swarm ships had altered their tactics, keeping their distance and firing only occasional shots while constantly changing position. They're being more cautious now, Reed said. They recognize us as a serious threat. Walker nodded. But they're still learning, adapting to our capabilities. He turned to Miller. What's the status of the main swarm fleet? Miller studied his readings. The bulk of their forces are still engaged with the Alliance fleet. However, I'm detecting a large group breaking away and heading in our direction. Estimated arrival, 20 minutes. Walker considered this news. They've identified us as the primary threat. Good. Good, sir? Davis asked, confused. Yes, good, Walker confirmed. Because now they'll make the same mistake our allies did. They'll focus on what they can see and measure. He rose from his chair and walked to the main tactical display, studying. The battlefield. The Tortoise has 3 primary systems, Walker explained to his crew. The gravity anchor to neutralize their space advantage, the layered defenses to withstand their attacks, and the quantum lock torpedoes to bypass their defenses. And they now know about all 3, Reed pointed out. Walker smiled. Yes, they do, which is exactly what we wanted. He turned to his communications officer. Davis, contact Admiral Kroll. Tell him to prepare his fleet for a coordinated attack when the main swarm force arrives. What's the plan, sir? Banks asked. Walker's eyes gleamed with determination. While the swarm is focusing all their attention on neutralizing our known capabilities, we'll reveal why the Tortoise was truly built to be slow. He walked to a secure console at the rear of the bridge and placed his hand on the scanner. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a single red button protected by a clear cover. Chief Engineer Torres, Walker said formally. Begin power transfer to the core system. Torres looked up, her expression serious. Captain, once we activate the core, there's no going back. The power requirements will drain our reserves to critical levels. I'm aware, Walker said, but if we don't use everything we have now, there might not be a later. He flipped open the protective cover. The bridge crew watched in silence, many of them seeing this secret system for the first time. This, Walker said, his hand hovering over the button, is why the Tortoise moves so slowly. Every other system is secondary to what we're about to unleash. He pressed the button. Deep within the massive ship, something awakened. A low hum began to build, vibrating through the deck plates as the Tortoise's true purpose was finally revealed. The Tortoise trembled as power flowed from its massive reactors into the core system. Lights dimmed momentarily throughout the ship before auxiliary power kicked in. Core activation sequence at 30%, Chief Engineer Torres reported, her voice tight with concentration. All power conduits holding steady. Captain Walker stood at the center of the bridge, outwardly calm despite the tension filling the air. Status of the approaching swarm fleet? Lieutenant Reed checked her tactical display. 15 minutes until they reach our position. 47 vessels detected, Captain. Walker nodded. And Admiral Kroll's forces? The Alliance fleet is regrouping behind the protection of our gravity anchor field. The Admiral confirms they'll be ready to coordinate with us when the swarm arrives. Walker turned to Weapons Officer Banks. Prepare remaining quantum torpedoes. We'll need them for the initial assault. 6 torpedoes ready, sir, Banks confirmed, but that's all we have until production can synthesize more. The quantum-lock torpedoes were incredibly effective but also complex and energy-intensive to create. The Tortoise had launched only a limited supply for this mission. Science Officer Miller looked up from his station. Captain, I'm detecting unusual readings from the swarm vessels we damaged earlier. They appear to be repairing themselves. Walker frowned. Self-healing technology? It seems so, Miller confirmed. Not full regeneration, but they're sealing hull breaches and restoring damaged systems. Adaptable and resilient, Walker muttered. This explains how they've overwhelmed so many outposts so quickly. A notification chimed on Torres's console. Core activation at 50%, Captain. The reality field generators are coming online. Admiral Kroll paced the bridge of the Swift Striker, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The main swarm fleet was approaching rapidly, and despite the advantage gained from the human ship's mysterious technology, he wasn't confident they could withstand such numbers. Status of our fleet? He demanded. 27 vessels combat ready, sir, his tactical officer replied. 14 more with partial capabilities, 11 completely disabled. Kroll frowned. Even with the Tortoise's help, they were outnumbered and many of his ships were damaged. Sir, his communications officer called out, Captain Walker is hailing us. Walker's face appeared on screen, looking remarkably composed given the circumstances. Admiral, Walker said without preamble, in approximately 10 minutes the Tortoise will activate its core system. When that happens, I need your fleet to move to these coordinates. A set of spatial coordinates appeared on Kroll's tactical display. What exactly is this core system? Kroll asked. Something that will change the rules of engagement, Walker replied. But I need your word that what you see today will remain classified at the highest level. Kroll hesitated only briefly. You have it, Captain. My word as a Velox Admiral. Good, Walker said. When the system activates, there will be a visible distortion around the Tortoise. Do not, under any circumstances, allow your ships to enter that distortion field. Understood, Kroll agreed, curiosity burning within him. And then, Walker said with a slight smile, we spring the trap. Back on the Tortoise, the core system continued its activation sequence. The humming had grown louder, and subtle vibrations ran through the ship's structure. Core at 70%, Torres announced. Reality field generators at nominal levels. Spatial anchor points established. Walker checked the time. The swarm will be here in 7 minutes. Will we be ready? Torres nodded confidently. Yes, sir. The core will reach full activation in 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Walker turned to his crew. This is what the Tortoise was built for. This moment. When Earth joined the Galactic Alliance, we saw how every other species focused on speed and firepower. But our scientist took a different approach. He walked to the main view screen, which showed the approaching swarm fleet, their ships moving in perfect formation. They think they understand us now, he continued. They've seen our gravity anchor, our defensive capabilities, our quantum torpedoes. They believe they know what they're facing. He smiled grimly. They're wrong. The swarm commander, a being of complex crystalline structures and neural energy fields, processed the data from its scouts. The human vessel represented an unexpected challenge, but not an insurmountable one. Its ships had adapted to the gravity distortion field, developing compensatory algorithms. The quantum weapons were concerning, but their limited number had been noted. The defensive capabilities were impressive, but sustained attack from multiple vectors would eventually overwhelm them. Victory was still calculated as highly probable. The commander dispatched new instructions to its fleet. They would surround the human vessel, attacking from all sides simultaneously while staying beyond the range of its known weapons. What the swarm commander could not calculate was what it did not know. The swarm fleet has changed course, Reed reported. They're spreading out, likely planning to surround us, Walker nodded. As expected, status of the core, 90% and rising steadily, Torres replied. 4 minutes to full activation. Walker opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands, secure for core activation. We've trained for this, people. Trust your equipment and your training. Throughout the massive vessel, crew members double-checked their stations and secured loose items. Though they had drilled for this moment many times, no one had ever experienced a full core activation outside of simulations. Admiral Kroll confirms his fleet is moving to the designated coordinates, Davis reported from communications. Good, Walker said. Now we wait. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. On the view screen, they watched as the swarm fleet approached, their formation spreading wider as they prepared to encircle the tortoise. Core at 95%, Torres announced. Final calibrations in progress. The first swarm ships came within weapons range, their forward cannons glowing as they prepared to fire. They're charging weapons, Banks warned. Walker remained calm. Hold position. Let them come closer. More swarm ships arrived, taking up positions around the tortoise in a three-dimensional sphere of deadly intent. Core at 99%, Torres said, her voice rising with excitement. Ready for activation on your command, Captain. The swarm ships opened fire simultaneously, dozens of energy beams striking the tortoise's shields from all directions. Shields holding at 87%, Banks reported, but they won't last long under this level of concentrated fire. Walker waited another moment, ensuring that the entire swarm fleet had committed to the attack. Then he gave the order they had all been waiting for. Activate the reality core. Torres pressed a series of commands into her console. Reality core activated. For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself appeared to ripple around the tortoise, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The distortion expanded, rapidly engulfing the nearest swarm ships before they could react. Reality field stable, Miller reported, watching his instruments with wide eyes. Localized space-time manipulation achieved. Outside the ship, the laws of physics were being rewritten. Within the reality field generated by the core, the tortoise controlled the fundamental rules of movement, energy, and matter. The swarm. Ships caught in the field suddenly found themselves moving at a fraction of their normal speed, not because of any external force acting upon them, but because the very nature of velocity had been altered within the field. Phase shift the field, Walker ordered. Torres adjusted her controls. Phase shifting now. The reality field pulsed, and the trapped swarm ships began to drift helplessly, their propulsion systems unable to function properly in the altered physics of the field. Walker turned to Banks. Target all immobilized vessels, fire quantum torpedoes. The remaining quantum torpedoes launched, connecting instantly with their targets. 6 more swarm ships erupted in silent explosions. Field expansion at maximum. Radius, Torres reported. Holding stable at 20,000 kilometers. Walker nodded in satisfaction. Now for the final step. Communications, signal Admiral Kroll. Tell him to commence the attack pattern we discussed. Outside the reality field, the Alliance fleet moved in, their weapons firing at the disoriented swarm vessels. Without their speed advantage, and with many of their ships trapped in the field, the swarm's carefully planned assault fell apart. Walker watched the battle unfold, his expression solemn. This is why the tortoise moves so slowly, he said quietly to Reed beside him. Nearly all our power is reserved for the reality core. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense. It's something far more profound. Reed nodded in understanding. We don't need to be faster than our enemies. No, Walker agreed, not when we can change the nature of speed itself. On the view screen, the battle continued, with Alliance ships methodically destroying the confused and disoriented swarm vessels. What had begun as a near-certain defeat was transforming into an unexpected victory. But in the engine room, Torres frowned at her readings. The reality core was consuming power at an alarming rate, and stress fractures were beginning to appear in the containment systems. "Captain," she called over the comm, "we have a problem." "What's the problem, Torres?" Captain Walker asked sharply, hearing the concern in his chief engineer's voice. "The reality core is consuming power faster than our models predicted," Torres replied. "The containment field is showing microfractures. If they spread, we could lose control of the field." Walker turned to Science Officer Miller. "Analysis?" Miller was already reviewing the data. "The swarm ships are actively fighting against the reality field. They're generating some kind of counter-resonance that's putting additional strain on our systems." "How long can we maintain the field?" Walker asked. Torres's voice came back over the comm. "At current degradation rates, 15 minutes, maybe 20. After that, either the core will shut down or—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge knew that a catastrophic failure of the reality core could tear the tortoise apart from the inside. Walker considered their options. 15 minutes might be enough time for the Alliance fleet to destroy the remaining swarm ships, but it would be close. "Communications, get me Admiral Kroll," he ordered. Kroll's face appeared on screen moments later. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically as the swift striker engaged the enemy. "Captain Walker," Kroll said, "your ship's ability is quite remarkable." "Thank you, Admiral, but we have a problem," Walker said quickly. "We can only maintain the reality field for approximately 15 more minutes. After that, the swarm ships inside the field will regain their mobility." Kroll nodded grimly. "Understood. We'll focus our attacks on the ships trapped in your field." "There's more," Walker continued. "When the field collapses, there will be a significant energy discharge. Your ships need to be at least 50,000 kilometers away when that happens." Kroll's expression showed concern. "That's a large safety margin. Will your crew be safe?" "We've prepared for this," Walker assured him, though in truth they had never tested a full-scale shutdown under combat conditions. After ending the communication, Walker turned to his bridge crew. "We need to buy the Alliance fleet as much time as possible. Lieutenant Reed, what's the status of the swarm vessels?" Reed studied her tactical display. 23 enemy ships remain trapped in our reality field. 16 have been destroyed. The Alliance fleet is engaging the remaining 8 ships outside our field. Walker nodded. "Banks, do we have any conventional weapons that can still function within the reality field?" Banks checked his systems. "Point defense lasers should still work, sir. The physics affecting them is simple enough that our systems can compensate." "Good. Target any swarm ship within range and fire." The Tortoise's point defense systems, originally designed to destroy incoming missiles and small craft, began firing at the trapped swarm ships. The lasers were less powerful than the main weapons of most warships, but with the enemy vessels unable to evade properly, every shot found its mark. Meanwhile, the Alliance fleet concentrated its fire on the immobilized targets, methodically, destroying one after another. In engineering, Torres and her team worked frantically to stabilize the reality core. The massive device occupied the central chamber of the engineering section, a complex arrangement of glowing crystals and pulsing energy fields contained within multiple layers of shielding. "Coolant pressure is rising in Section 4, reported one of her engineers, diverting additional flow." Torres monitored the status displays, her face illuminated by their urgent red warnings. The core temperature was rising despite their best efforts, and the containment field was weakening. She opened a direct channel to the bridge. "Captain, we need to start powering down the core. A controlled shutdown will take at least 10 minutes. "Understood," Walker replied. "Begin shutdown procedures. We'll alert the fleet." Torres took a deep breath and entered her authorization. Code. Beginning core shutdown sequence, Stage 1, power reduction. The lights throughout the ship dimmed as the engineers carefully began reducing the energy flow to the reality core. It was delicate work. Too fast, and the sudden change could cause the field to collapse catastrophically. Too slow, and the II core might overheat before they could shut it down. On the bridge, Walker watched as the battle continued. The Alliance ships had destroyed over half the trapped swarm vessels, but time was running out. "Reality field beginning to contract," Miller reported. Down to 18,000 kilometers radius and shrinking as power is reduced. Walker nodded. Communications. Alert Admiral Kroll that we've begun shutdown procedures. His ships have 8 minutes to complete their attacks and withdraw to a safe distance. As Davis relayed the message, Walker noticed something on the tactical display. The swarm ships outside our field. They're breaking off from the Alliance fleet and heading straight for us. Reed confirmed his observation. 8 swarm vessels on an intercept course. They seem to have realized we're their primary threat. Walker wasn't surprised. They're intelligent. They've identified the source of the field that's trapping their companions. He turned to Banks. Status of our shields? Down to 62% and holding, Banks replied. But if all 8 focus their fire on us? Walker understood the implication. Reed, alert Admiral Kroll. Tell him we need assistance. Before Reed could send the message, the ship rocked as the first swarm vessel fired upon them. The shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact. Shield impact at 58%, Banks called out. They're using some kind of focused plasma weapon. More impacts followed as the other swarm ships joined the attack. Each hit drained more power from the already strained systems of the Tortoise. Shield at 43%, 39%. Banks reported as the attacks continued. Walker gripped the arms of his command chair. How much longer on the core shutdown? 6 minutes, Miller replied, relaying information from engineering. Another hit rocked the ship. Shields at 32%. Banks announced, his voice tight. Walker made a quick decision. Divert auxiliary power to shields. We need to hold out until the core is safely shut down. On the Swift Striker, Admiral Kroll received the Tortoise's distress call. Looking at his tactical display, he saw the human ship under heavy attack while its mysterious field continued to shrink. All vessels, he commanded. Break off current. Attacks. Target the swarm ships attacking the human vessel. His tactical officer looked up in surprise. Sir, we can still destroy more of the trapped ships before— The Tortoise saved us, Kroll interrupted. Now we save them. Execute my orders. The Velox fleet, once so dismissive of the slow human ship, now raced to its defense. On the Tortoise, the situation was becoming critical. The shields were failing under the concentrated attack and the core shutdown was taking longer than expected. Shields at 18%, Banks reported grimly. We can't take much more of this. Torres's voice came over the comm. Captain, we have a problem. The containment field is destabilizing faster than we can reduce power. We need to strengthen the shields around engineering immediately or— Her words were cut off by a massive impact that shook the entire ship. Warning klaxons blared throughout the vessel. Hull breach on deck 12, someone shouted. Emergency. Force fields engaged. Walker looked at the damage reports flooding his screen. The situation was dire, but they just needed a little more time. Captain, Reed called out. The Alliance fleet is engaging the swarm ships attacking us. On the view screen, Walker saw the Swift Striker and several other Velox vessels racing toward them, weapons blazing. Several swarm ships broke off their attack on the Tortoise to meet this new threat. Core shutdown at 82%, Miller reported. 4 more minutes. Another hit rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from a nearby console. Shields at 11%, Banks announced. Walker opened a channel to engineering. Torres, status? We're holding on, Captain, she replied, her voice nearly drowned out by the sound of alarms in the background, but just barely. Walker watched as the Alliance ships engaged the swarm, drawing their fire away from the Tortoise. It was a momentary respite, but perhaps enough. 3 minutes to complete shutdown, Miller announced. The ship shuddered again as a glancing blow struck their weakened shields. Shields at 7%, Banks reported. Walker held his breath, watching the countdown. They were so close. Core shutdown at 95%, Miller said, hope creeping into his voice. 1 minute remaining. Suddenly, Torres's urgent voice came over the comm. Captain, the field is collapsing faster than we can control. Everyone brace for— Her warning was cut off as a massive surge of energy rippled through the ship. The lights flickered, and for a moment it seemed as if the Tortoise might tear itself apart. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The bridge was eerily quiet apart from the steady beep of damage control alarms. "Report," Walker demanded, picking himself up from the floor where he'd been thrown. Miller checked his readings. "The core is offline. Reality field has completely dissipated." "Casualties?" Walker asked. Reed was already reviewing reports. "Minor injuries reported across all decks. No fatalities. Torres reports engineering is secure." Walker let out a sigh of relief. "And the swarm?" "The vessels that were trapped in our field appear completely disabled," Reed reported. "The Alliance fleet is mopping up the remaining active ships. We did it, sir." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, quickly stifled as they returned to their professional demeanor. Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Captain," Davis called from communications. "Admiral Kroll is hailing us." Kroll's face appeared on screen, his silver skin smudged with what looked like soot. "Captain Walker, it seems your slow ship has saved us all." Walker nodded. "Sometimes, Admiral, the race goes not to the swift, but to the steadfast." 3 days later, the Tortoise limped back to the main Alliance station for repairs. As they approached the docking bay, Walker was surprised to see the crews of dozens of ships, Velox, Trebian, and many other species, lined up along the viewing platforms. "What's happening?" he asked. Reed smiled. "Word has spread about what?" "We did, sir. They're here to welcome us." As the Tortoise completed its painfully slow docking maneuver, the assembled crews began to applaud. The sound echoed through the station, a salute to the ship that had turned its greatest perceived weakness into its ultimate strength. Admiral Kroll was waiting when Walker disembarked. The Velox commander extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "I once called your ship a space rock," Kroll said. "I was wrong." Walker shook the offered hand. "The mistake is understandable, Admiral. We humans have an old story about a race between a fast hare and a slow tortoise. The hare was sure it would win because of its speed. And yet the tortoise won." Kroll finished, surprising Walker. "I've been studying your Earth fables since our battle. Fascinating wisdom in such simple tales." As they walked together toward the Alliance Command Center, engineers and scientists from a dozen species were already gathering around the damaged tortoise, eager to learn from the ship that had redefined space warfare. The slow human warship, once mocked by all, had become the most respected vessel in the fleet, not because it had finally proven itself fast, but because it had shown the galaxy that true innovation means thinking beyond the obvious path. Sometimes, victory comes not from being the fastest, but from changing the rules of the race entirely.